I didn't move to Ashwood Grove for trouble. I moved for peace, quiet walks, a modest porch, and a break from the 22 years I'd spent in uniform. As chief of police in a neighboring city, I'd seen more than enough chaos for a lifetime. So when I retired and bought a ranch-style home tucked into the corner lot of a clean, rule-loving HOA community, I figured my hardest battle would be choosing paint colors. Then came the stares. I noticed them the first week, lingering glances from neighbors who waved at everyone else but stiffened when they saw me unloading groceries. My accent didn't give much away, but my skin did. And in a neighborhood like Ashwood Grove, that was enough. At the center of it all was Karen Whitaker, of the HOA's self-appointed moral authority, and a woman who wielded bylaws like battle axes. She had the kind of smile that never reached her eyes and a voice that curdled milk. Her house sat diagonally across from mine, her manicured shrubs trimmed like military ranks, and her surveillance camera always seemed aimed at my driveway. Wasted no time making herself known. The first notice came 3 days after I moved in. Fence 2 inches too short, violation of Section 4C. Then, mailbox post exceeds HOA-approved height. A week later, American flag displayed. Without advance approval, HOA Form 12 not submitted. I didn't take the bait. I was used to bigger fights than yard decor in mailboxes, but I documented every notice, every passive-aggressive note left under my doormat, every neighbor who avoided eye contact. Then there was her son, Austin Whitaker, jobless, arrogant, and always shirtless, like it was a protest against basic civility. He strutted the neighborhood like he owned it, dragging a baseball bat behind him like he was auditioning for a B-movie gang film. The first words he said to me weren't "welcome to the neighborhood" or "need help with those boxes." No, it was "didn't know they let you people buy homes here." I stared at him, measured, and walked away. No badge, no authority. Not yet. Still, I started to wonder if this place was worth it. I'd faced gang leaders and violent offenders, yet here I was, being racially profiled by a man-child in flip-flops and his clipboard-wielding mother. But I'm not built to run. Saturday morning, the week before Memorial Day, I returned from the store with a full load of ribs produce, drinks, and enough snacks to host my grandkids the next weekend. I parked the truck, opened the tailgate, and began unloading. Then I heard it. Damn. Look who hit the food stamp jackpot, Austin said, strolling up like he had business being anywhere near me. I didn't reply, just kept grabbing bags. "You gonna share?" or what he said, reaching into my truck bed. "I'm starving." "Don't touch that," I said, steady but sharp. He grinned and grabbed a bag anyway, yanking out a carton of eggs like it was his. "Put it back, or what gonna cry to the HOA? My mom is the HOA." He turned his back, tossing the carton from hand to hand like it was a toy. I pulled out my phone and started recording. His smile vanished when he realized I wasn't playing. That's when the front door across the street burst open. "What is going on out here?" Karen shrieked, robe flapping like storm sails. "He's threatening me," Austin shouted. "He's going crazy. He tried to steal my groceries," I said evenly. Karen stomped across her lawn like it owed her money. She snatched the eggs from her son and, in a move that surprised even him, threw them onto my driveway. They splattered against the pavement, yolk running like a stain on her already thin credibility. "You don't belong here," she snapped. "I'm calling the police." "Please do," I said. My voice was calm, measured. Years of command training and fieldwork had taught me how to hold power in my chest like breath. I wasn't worried about what would happen next, but Karen should have been, because, in all her frantic yelling, she had missed one very important detail. She was calling the police on the police chief, and I had the whole thing on camera. Karen paced the sidewalk like she was leading a protest march, phone clutched in her hand and eyes darting between me, her son, and the broken eggs. Her voice was loud enough to echo off the trimmed hedges of Ashwood Grove. "Yes, I need officers here immediately. There's a dangerous man threatening my son," she shouted into her phone, the volume dialed to theatrical. "He's standing on my street, yelling, recording us, acting unstably as unstable." I said nothing, just kept recording. Austin, now standing a few feet back, flashed a smug grin like he'd just scored a touchdown. "You're finished," he muttered, pointing at me. "Should have kept your hood trash out of here." I didn't flinch. What neither of them knew was that the call Karen placed had pinged dispatch in my former department, my department. I'd spent over 2 decades building trust in protocols that didn't fail under pressure, and I knew exactly who would respond to a call from this side of the neighborhood. Sure enough, 7 minutes later, a black and white unit cruised around the corner. Officer Lopez and Officer Jackson, 2 of my most trusted guys, good cops, sharp minds, and even sharper memory. We'd gone through everything together: riot control, meth busts, community building, and they knew exactly who I was. As soon as Jackson stepped out of the vehicle, his eyes landed on me, and recognition flashed across his face. "Chief?" he asked, instinctively straightening his posture. Karen froze. "Madrant, excuse me," she spat. "Did you just call him chief?" Lopez followed, already scanning the scene. He saw the cracked eggs, the open trunk, the phone in my hand, and Austin pretending to look innocent while gripping a half-crushed grocery bag behind his back. "Chief Brooks," I said, offering my hand to Lopez. Retired last month. Just trying to unload some groceries. Lopez nodded firmly, grasping my hand like a man who knew the truth but would let it play out by the book. Karen blinked rapidly, her confident smirk replaced with unease. You're the police chief. I turned to her and gave a nod. Was old habits die hard, especially when people start stealing from me. Jackson opened his notepad, so let me get this straight. You, ma'am, he said, gesturing to Karen, called 911 claiming you were being threatened by a man who was unloading groceries in his own driveway. Karen looked flustered, but still clung to her delusions. He was recording us without permission. That's illegal. My son was terrified. Actually, this is a one-party consent state, Lopez interjected. Recording in public or on private property you own isn't illegal, and considering your son crossed onto his driveway and took something from his vehicle. I was just joking, Austin interrupted. I didn't steal anything. I turned the phone screen toward them. The video was clear. Austin reaching into my trunk, Karen destroying my groceries, her threats, his words. Lopez sighed and tapped the edge of his notepad. Based on this footage and Chief Brooks' statement, this looks like petty theft, property destruction, and possible harassment. You're taking his side, Karen barked. No, ma'am, Jackson replied calmly. We're taking the law's side. I want him removed from this neighborhood, she screamed. He's disturbing the peace. Lopez raised an eyebrow. He lives here. Karen's jaw trembled. Austin stepped back, arms crossed now, eyes flickering with a dawning realization that this wouldn't end the way he'd hoped. Do you want to press charges, sir? Jackson asked me quietly. Not today, I said, pocketing my phone. But I want a full incident report filed. And I'll be forwarding a copy to the HOA and county mediator. Karen's voice cracked. You can't do that. I can. And I will, I said. The officers turned to leave, professional but firm, leaving behind the shattered remnants of Karen's illusion of control. I locked eyes with her one last time. You wanted the police, I said. You got them. I began picking up the broken eggs, one by one, letting the silence stretch between us like barbed wire. Karen stood paralyzed, her pride punctured, her power slipping like yolk through her fingers, and in that silence the neighborhood began to stir, curtains parting, phones filming, whispers rising. The real story was just beginning. By Monday morning, the fallout had already begun, but not in the direction Karen hoped. While she expected me to shrink away quietly after the police incident, what she hadn't counted on was the ripple effect across Ashwood Grove. Whispers turned into full-blown conversations on front lawns, in group chats, and at the park benches. I didn't need to speak much. People saw what happened. They saw Karen throw eggs, saw her son steal groceries, and saw uniformed officers salute me with a chief. And still, she doubled down. That afternoon, I received a certified envelope hand-delivered by a high school intern in a bright HOA vest. He didn't even make eye contact as he thrust it toward me and turned away like I might detain him. Inside, notice of violation and disciplinary ACTO into Jonathan Brooks, Ashwood Grove, resident subject intimidation of residents filming without consent and disrupting community harmony. You are hereby ordered to appear before the HOA Disciplinary Board for review of your conduct on the morning of May 13th. Further violation may result in fines or suspension of HOA privileges. I read it twice, then chuckled. The paper practically dripped with Karen's perfume and paranoia. It was a power play. She thought she could twist the situation and use the bylaws to frame me as the aggressor. It was classic HOA warfare, weaponize red tape to suffocate opposition. But what Karen never understood was this. I wrote the book on authority, and I always kept receipts. At 6 p.m. sharp, I walked into the HOA clubhouse. The board sat in a line behind a long folding table. 3 members I barely knew, all seated, with folded hands and stiff expressions. In the middle sat Karen, her lips pressed into a razor-thin line, gavel in front of her like she was presiding over a courtroom. Mr. Brooks, she said, gesturing toward a lone folding chair across from the table, we appreciate your attendance. This meeting has been called to address your inappropriate behavior and potential breach of HOA community standards. I sat, rested my arms on the table, and set down a folder thick with printed pages. Karen continued. It has come to our attention that you have been filming residents without consent, harassing board members, and intimidating a fellow neighbor with your son. I interjected. Let's not pretend we're talking about anyone else. The room shifted. One of the board members, Martin, I believe his name was, fidgeted and looked away. Karen's nostrils flared. Regardless of who the behavior was aggressive. I see. Let's review the facts then, I said calmly, flipping open my folder. Here are printouts of the state's one-party consent laws, confirming I was within my rights to record. Here's the police incident report. And here, I said, sliding a photo across the table, is a frame-by-frame shot of your son removing groceries from my vehicle. Theft. Documented, not alleged. Karen snatched the photo like it burned her fingers. I also took the liberty, I continued, of filing a complaint with the State HOA Oversight Commission. Since this hearing violates several procedural bylaws including lack of prior notice, absence of legal representation options, and quorum irregularities. The board looked at each other, confused. And if that isn't enough, I added, reaching for the final document. This is a signed affidavit from Officer Lopez, stating I acted within legal parameters and faced racial harassment on my own property. Silence. Karen cleared her throat. These documents don't change the fact that your presence has been disruptive. No, I said, my voice low but deliberate. My existence disrupts your illusion of control. Martin finally spoke. I move to dismiss all charges against Mr. Brooks, effective immediately. The woman beside him hesitated, then raised her hand. Seconded. All in favor? I asked, locking eyes with Karen. The vote was unanimous. Karen's face paled. Her carefully curated mask cracked as the gavel sat untouched before her. Meeting ended in murmurs, the board dispersing like fog in sunlight. Karen sat alone at the table, staring at her notes, stunned into silence. Outside, as I exited the clubhouse, neighbors waited not with pitchforks, but with cautious nods and quiet respect. They had seen the performance, and more importantly, they had seen the truth. The real shift had begun. Karen had ruled this HOA like a petty dictator for years, but today, she'd been outmaneuvered by someone she underestimated, someone who not only knew the law, but had enforced it his entire life. I wasn't here to make friends, I was here to make sure tyrants like her never made neighbors feel powerless again. By the end of the week, Ashwood Grove felt different, like a storm had passed, but the thunder still echoed. The facade of suburban harmony had cracked, and through that fracture, truth had slipped out like sunlight. Karen's grip on the H was weakening. The residents, once tight-lipped and compliant, had started whispering louder. The incident with Austin wasn't isolated. One neighbor confided that Karen had fined her $200 for a non-compliant bird feeder. Another revealed Karen had blocked a mobility ramp installation for a retired veteran, citing aesthetic disruption. Every story dripped with control masked as community enforcement. All that power, and no one had ever questioned it until now. Word of the disciplinary hearing had spread. People had seen me walk into that clubhouse and walk out unscathed, while Karen had remained inside, flustered and exposed. I hadn't needed to brag. The silence spoke volumes, but Karen wasn't done. 2 days later, a flyer showed up in every mailbox, printed in thick red letters. Special HOA meeting, vote of confidence in current President Mandari. ATT&ANC, preserve order, preserve harmony, protect our standards. I almost laughed. The phrasing was desperate. Vote of confidence was just HOA speak for please don't overthrow me. I attended. Of course, the clubhouse was packed, standing room only. People who hadn't shown up in years now leaned against walls and sat cross-legged on the floor. They were tired of Karen's reign. But more than that, they were curious. Curious if the stories were true. Curious if change was possible. Karen stood at the front, flanked by a podium and a printed banner that read leadership with integrity. Irony at its finest. She spoke first. With the recent unrest, she began, voice brittle but polished. Some have attempted to undermine this community's values with baseless accusations and hostile behavior. As your president, I have only ever acted in the interest of Ashwood Grove. A few polite claps, a cough, a whisper. Then, the floor opened for questions. I stepped forward, not as a challenger, but as a witness. My name is Jonathan Brooks, I said. Some of you know me as your neighbor. Some of you now know I served as police chief for over 2 decades. Heads turned, phones came out, Karen's fingers clutched the podium. In that time, I continued, I've seen how unchecked power poisons communities. And I've seen how it starts small petty fines, targeting vulnerable neighbors, twisting rules until they serve personal vendettas. I held up a file of reports and testimonies, dozens of them, anonymous but detailed. Residents who had finally come forward. Your president has misused her position. She's cost you money. She's violated rights. And she's intimidated anyone who dared speak up. Karen interrupted, voice sharp. That is a slanderous accusation. No, I said, voice rising only slightly. It's a documented truth. And now it's in the hands of the State HOA Oversight Commission and the County Attorney's Office. The room erupted. Murmurs turned into voices, voices into frustration. For once, the fear had shifted direction. The vote was quick. 82 homes voted, 67 for her removal. Karen stood motionless as her title was stripped in a single, final tally. She didn't shout, she didn't cry. She just walked out the front doors like a ghost that had finally realized was no longer welcome. Austin was never seen again. He moved out within the week. Rumor was he'd been sent to stay with a cousin in another county. Some say Karen followed shortly after. Others say she still owns the house but never leaves it. As for me, I stayed, not to gloat, but because people like Karen thrive when no one's watching. And now, everyone was watching. The new HOA board was elected within the month. Diverse, fair, transparent. They repealed nearly half of Karen's enhanced regulations and launched a formal complaint process for future violations. Fines dropped, smiles returned. One afternoon, as I mowed my lawn, a young girl from down the street rode past on her scooter and shouted, "Thanks for fixing the neighborhood, Mr. Brooks." I smiled and waved. It wasn't about heroics, it was about refusing to let injustice wear a sweater set and hide behind a nameplate. Karen had called the cops, thinking her voice would be the loudest in the room. She forgot I was the room, and this neighborhood. It belongs to everyone now.